Hi everyone, I'm Megan, and the assessment that I chose was a 1 minute paper. And this one was kind of cool because it could be both formative and summative assessment, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So, what is a 1 minute paper? So, a 1 minute paper is just a really short in class writing activity where students respond to a teacher posed question. Um, so these questions and prompts have students reflect on the day's lesson. So there's both benefits for teachers and students when it comes to using a 1 minute paper. Some of the benefits for teachers is that they get rapid feedback. So students can write down what they remember from the lesson or questions that they still have or things that they're confused about. So teachers are able to adjust their lessons based on the feedback that they get. It's also very adaptable for teachers. It can be a formative or a summative assessment based on the questions that teachers ask. And it's also good for students because they're able to reflect on the lesson that they just had and helps them kind of retain that information that they just learned. They also can ask questions to teachers, and this helps them to be able to get those questions answered maybe in a later lesson. So, a 1 minute paper, the credit goes to a professor named Charles Schwartz. He was a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Even though at the same time, some other people were using 1 minute papers. So it was popular in the 1980s, but most of the credit goes to Charles Schwartz. And he used them in his lectures and presentations, and he called them ballots. He would, before the presentation, go around the class and put paper on at each of the seats, and he used them to get feedback, um, take surveys and ask questions. So it was just a good way for him to get that feedback and see what adjustments he needed to make in his lectures. So the theory that goes mostly behind 1 minute papers is cognitivism because it focuses on the brain and the intermental activities. So cognitivism focuses on thinking, memory, knowing, and problem solving. And 1 minute papers, they really focus on memory and have students reflect back on the things that they just learned. And so, one analogy that cognitivists like to use is that the mind is like a computer. So, information comes in, it's processed, and there's certain outcomes. That's kind of like a 1 minute paper. During the lesson, students receive information and they process it, but a 1 minute paper helps them process that information even more, helps them see where they're at, um, and shows the teacher, where the students need more instruction and where they've blocked in information. So students are really able to think back and reflect on the things that they've already learned. So what it looks like in a classroom setting, they're very short activities at the end of class or at the end of a lesson where students pull out a piece of paper and a pencil and they answer a question that's posed by the teacher. And the questions really can vary. They can test students' knowledge and kind of quiz them, looking for main concepts that were taught in the lesson. They can have students reflect on what they learned, maybe having them discuss what they liked about the lesson, what they disliked, and what surprised them, or what they disagreed with. So really just getting students to wonder, letting the students ask questions about what they would like to learn more about this topic, or questions that they have about what they learned. So here are some potential questions that you could ask. for a 1-minute paper. So this is the cool part about using a 1-minute paper, is that the assessment and scoring really can vary based on how you want to use it in your classroom. If you're using it as a formative assessment, it can be very informal. You can just keep a journal maybe as you are reading the prompts that your students wrote. You can write down questions that they had, or things that they maybe didn't quite understand as they were reflecting, and you could address those issues in the next lesson. So you would just give students a participation score for giving you that feedback. As if you use it for a summative assessment, you can make it a little more formal and treat it like a quiz. When you use it as a summative assessment, you need to ask questions that are based on students' understanding. So searching for maybe main concepts that were taught in the lesson. So you would give them a score based on that understanding, more like a quiz. And here are my resources.